Hi there, it's Michael Cowan here again for No Picket Fence, and we're talking to Mike Stopforth today. We're going to have a chat about social media. How are you doing there, Mike? And thank you for taking time out.
I'm good, thanks, and you, Mike. Good to catch up again,
Yeah,
and thanks for the opportunity to be on the show, man.
no, lovely to have you. And just really, I wanted to stop and have a chat about social media because it's such a big beast. I mean, I know the whole digital marketing field's a big beast, and unless you're really in the thick of things, it can get very confusing very quickly where to go, what to go, and how to go about doing it.
Sure.
Maybe just to start off and contextualize, how does social media, what is social media, and how does it fit into the whole digital marketing strategy and that whole framework?
Cool. You'd expect after 6 years that I had a good answer to this, but I'm gonna stumble along this one. I hope for the best. But you know, the funny thing, Mike, is that after all these years, social media is probably has less of a strict definition than it did, sort of pre-Facebook, pre-Twitter.
Yeah,
For a long time, it's been all about tools, platforms, and technologies that have helped what I like to call ordinary people, people like you and me, do extraordinary things on the web.
yeah,
Publish content and make videos and participate and engage and have conversations, and that's cool because it has changed the way that I think
yeah,
consumers interact with media fundamentally, which changes a whole bunch of other things, and that's why social media has become an unhelpful term, ironically enough, because it's become more about how these tools and platforms and technologies, and I think the trends that are associated with them,
yes,
have then shifted the way that people live fundamentally. Like the way we
mm,
communicate at the most basic levels, the way that we interact socially, so the way that society, communicates and collaborates and connects has been.
yeah,
I was reading an article the other day, just pre the Facebook IPO, describing Mark Zuckerberg as somebody who has not just got rich very quickly, but changed the way that
mm,
society works, which is one hell of a thing to say about somebody. There's very few people in the history
yeah,
of mankind that can be credited with changing the fabric of society. Possibly the last person was Gutenberg. So
yes,
that's pretty awesome. So social media is more than just Facebook or Twitter, and it's more even than Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and the rest of them. It's this ecosystem of collaborative communication and open sharing, and all the trends and technologies and advancements that go with that. So it's a very big thing, and that's why I think it's been becoming more and more helpful to compartmentalize what has been called social media for so long
okay,
into a couple of subtopics. So I'm particularly fascinated with things like social business at the moment, which is
yes.
the trying to examine how social media has changed the way that corporations work. So how finance works and legal works and HR and talent
Uh,
and recruitment, all of those good things. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point because it's very easy to apply an old methodology into a new channel. Just because you've got a TV advert doesn't mean it suddenly becomes a YouTube advert, does it?
No, sure, not at all. And I guess that's been the big mistake that so many organizations and brands have made.
Yeah,
Nobody wants to be left out, and nobody wants to be the last brand to be social. So the quick win is always the most logical one, but it's an illogical platform. These are organizations that have been built on
yeah,
methodologies that stem from an industrial age,
yes,
hierarchies and practices, and even marketing and advertising in the most traditional form stems from a. I mean, there's a series made about it. Mad Men is incredibly popular because it teaches us about, apart from being very well acted,
yeah,
it teaches us about how advertising has changed over the years. Now, the irony is that we've tried to apply those same industrial age methodologies to an information age way of thinking and communicating, and sometimes it's like shoving a square peg in a round hole, and it just
yeah,
doesn't work,
yeah.
which is where a lot of people have come up short.
No, absolutely, Mike. Talking about your buckets, would you like to break down those buckets or your kind of core streams? You mentioned social business.
Yes,
How else would you break it down?
there's for me, the two interesting branches now are social business, and one of the aspects of social business is social marketing. And
Yes,
social marketing is what I think a lot of people call social media. Social media for me is more when we start talking about the platforms, the mediums that we use to
yes,
connect in a new way. So for Facebook and Twitter and so on. Social marketing is the use of those channels and platforms to communicate and engage with audiences in a new way. And that's very cool for brands to discover, and a lot of people getting very excited about that, and a lot of agencies starting up around that particular line of business. Some questionable ones. For a while, so interesting space to watch, and then you've got the social business side, which is more broader. But I mean, it becomes really interesting because we start to look at if we looked at social commerce, we look at things like Kiva, we look at Kickstarter, we look at and all of a sudden we start to realize that there are commercial models that have been broken on the back of social behavior, and that's exciting. That's really cool because it starts to social talent or social recruitment or social human resource management, the harnessing of collective intellectual capital in organizations to make businesses smarter, looking at the internet as a microcosm of how business can and should work. And that for me is mind-blowing. That's a really cool space to be watching.
It really is. It makes me think of the Tesco Home Plus example. It's very easy to show those cool scanning in their smartphones, their products and services, but it means every process and system has to be redefined around a consumer that's moving now rather than static in front of a TV. So it is mind-blowing. But that said, and without getting too tied up into the whole ecosystems of things, where does one start with this whole process? Because it's very easy to jump onto Facebook or the Twitters. I mean, you hear Facebook has got 850 million or 900 million users now. But the question is, how relevant are they, and where does a small business start? Where does a mid-sized organization start to approach this whole ecosystem, the social ecosystem, not so much the business ecosystem, but the social ecosystem?
Sure. So I did a presentation the other day for one of the big four banks, SME business that did a roadshow around the country, and I developed a matrix. And that matrix plotted entrepreneurs who get social media, entrepreneurs who don't get social media, businesses that lend themselves towards social media, and businesses that don't lend themselves towards social media. So that was sort of how the matrix was constructed. And we looked at each one of those quadrants and tried to piece together what does social media mean for you in each of those quadrants. So for entrepreneurs who get social media and businesses that automatically lend themselves to social media, one would think that would be a pretty natural fit. Those guys are probably very active on social platforms already. Their own personal brands are a big part of their business brands, I had to laugh I was looking at Mike Sharman's Twitter feed today, and there was a chap that he quoted a friend of his from high school who runs a plumbing business now, very successful plumbing business, and his byline was "Your shit is my bread and butter." Which I thought was very cool. But there's some guys that just get social platforms and get social communication, and it's a very natural fit for them, and so their businesses, especially if they are businesses that naturally lend themselves towards this digital space, will probably migrate quite naturally into that arena. Then there's entrepreneurs who get social media, but businesses that don't quite fit in the social media space. Businesses that may be slightly less interesting. Maybe it's I'm trying to think of a good example. A cement reseller, or it's not the most glamorous industry. It's probably going to be very difficult to find customers in social media because people that buy cement are probably not sitting on Twitter all day, as opposed to, say, a fashion designer or somebody like that.
Yes, absolutely.
And for those guys, I would advise maybe concentrate less on social and focus more on paid search or other avenues of digital marketing.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. Yeah.
Then there are entrepreneurs who don't get social media, but businesses that definitely do lend. So there you might find, let's use the previous example of a fashion designer who is clueless about, she's never used Skype, she doesn't have a clue about how to set up a Facebook page. It's just she's not technical at all. But she's got a brand or a product or a business that lends itself towards social media, and that's where I would advise speak to a little agency. There are a number of agencies that Cerebra is an example. My business deals only with corporate brands because there's nothing more satisfying in this world than ignorance and a large budget. I love that combination. So this is going onto the internet. Huh?
No.
But then I get excited about a lot of youngest or smaller, not younger, smaller startups that are looking to help smaller businesses adopt social media, and that where there's the guy that is clueless but has got, or the girl is
Yeah.
clueless and has got this business that is a natural fit for social media. That I would say seek some help, even if it is a student or a family member or a PA that
Yeah.
is particularly clued up in social. Outsource that to those individuals. And then, of course, you get businesses that don't fit in social media and entrepreneurs that are clueless about social media. And I would say avoid it like the plague, because it
Yeah.
can only, it's not for everybody, you know what I mean? So there's some
No,
people
absolutely.
just not going to be happy on the Facebooks and the Twitters, and I think that's okay. So
No, and I think it is. Um, but how does one measure the effectiveness of social media? Because at the end of the day, a lot of these guys are really busy. As entrepreneurs, your time is very precious, and you want to make sure you're getting a return on that investment. How do you measure this, and how do you gauge this? Because it's very easy to be social, but not all social translates into a transaction conversion, money
sure,
conversion. So
sure.
how does one go about measuring this, and what criteria should one be looking at in terms of making sure you're doing the right things?
I recently bought a house, and for me, asking the question,
Yeah,
how do you measure social media ROI? Is like saying, how do you know if a house is good? Or
yeah,
how do I know if a house is nice? So when I decided to buy a house, I started with the
yeah,
area I was in. You know what I mean? I want to be in Morningside or Gallo Manor or Kibber Park or whatever, and those are the areas
yeah,
I'm interested in. And I only want to. So I'm not even going to look at anything outside of those boundaries. You know what I mean? And then
yeah.
it was, how many bedrooms do I want? I want 3 bedrooms. So if the house doesn't have 3 bedrooms, or if it has six
Okay,
bedrooms, I'm not because. And the point I'm trying to make here is that
yeah,
it really depends on what your goals and objectives are. It depends
yeah,
on what you want to achieve. And every single one of Cerebus clients has got a different goal and objective for social media.
yes,
For Vodacom, as an example, that the primary goal for engagement in social media is to improve the customer service experience. So for every customer complaint that they turn into a compliment or into a happy smiling face, Vodacom is thrilled.
okay,
For Toyota, it might be very different. For Toyota, it might be how much traffic can we drive to the website? Because on the website is where people book test drives, and test drives lead to car sales.
okay,
So very different brand, very different market, very different objectives. So what is more important in measuring social media ROI, I think,
yeah,
is determining strategic objectives and goals up front for engagement in social media. Unless you have those in place, there's no way of knowing whether you're being successful or not. Because
absolutely.
we get people that say to me, Mike, I want a Facebook fan page and I want 100,000 fans. And I say, that's cool. When do you want them by? So they say, I'd like them in 2 weeks. So I say, well, that's fine. What I want you to do is give me 3 million rand. I'm going to buy a Ferrari 458 Italia, and I'm going to advertise it on the Facebook fan page and say, if you like this page, you can get a Ferrari. And I promise you, we'll have 100,000 fans in
Yeah,
no time.
probably a million. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so everything's possible if you don't care about budget and you don't care about the audience. But there's a key conversation to be had around the nature of incentives on social platforms and what we're trying to
Yeah,
actually achieve with these audiences. If we're trying to achieve high levels of engagement and quality interaction, if we're trying to learn something from the audience,
yeah,
if we're trying to actually gain something from the audience, then the incentive has to be right. And sometimes the incentive has to be as simple as quality content and high levels of engagement and interest and authenticity and transparency on behalf of the brand. And if those are in place, then you're going to start seeing those results. But we have not worked with a brand yet where social media success has happened overnight.
yeah,
And it doesn't matter what the definition for success is. This is a long-term play,
yeah, absolutely.
as with any marketing and communication. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
important for brands to keep that in mind and just to temper their expectations around that.
Yeah, and I think it's a very good point. Certainly, I remember as a brand manager, in the early '90s, it was very easy to move from one brand to the next because the process was the same.
Sure.
It was a very technical process. There wasn't much scope for really deep and lateral strategies as are possible in a social media environment today. And I think it's a very important point. And within that context, and I think looking at the scope, Mike, what do you think is the key trends going into the rest of 2012 and dare I say 2013? I know that's not so far off, but in the social media world, that can be a really long way off given the pace of change in this environment.
Sure. If I could tell you what was going to happen, I probably wouldn't be sure
Talking.
I'd be doing it
Yeah.
and getting very rich very quickly. What I do hope to see happening though is and I'm going to steal a little bit from a good friend of mine, Richard Mulholland, who I hope sincerely that you'll have on the show one day because
Yes.
arguably the smartest human being that I know, and I've learned so much from him in the last couple of years. But Richard talks about social media platforms, or social networks. The
Yeah.
Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, LinkedIn, Google Plus, Flickr, whatever it may be, as being islands.
Okay.
We keep having more and more islands created, and we're fracturing identity and participation and engagement across all of these islands, and it becomes harder and harder to focus and to have quality engagement because there's just so many islands. So what Richard was talking about the other day is what we need is not more islands but a better boat. And I
Yes.
think that's hopefully where we're going to start to see the big players, the Facebooks, the Googles, playing. And ironically enough, I'm hoping for it, but I don't think we're going to see it happening because all of these guys want to create
Yeah.
walled gardens and they want to be precious and they want to keep
Yeah.
data to themselves. They don't want to share. So I don't see that happening anytime soon. But the big players are going to come in terms of data, in terms of commerce, and in terms of the ability to link our activity and consolidate our activity online in a more meaningful way. I also think we start to see things like Nike Nike doing the work with
Yeah.
their fuel bracelets, their Nike Plus fuel bracelets, and so on and so forth. One of which I would really like to get my hands on. I know Andy's got one. He's probably bragging about it on the on the podcast. He's a big fan of Schadenfreude, Andy. But so I would like to see more brands
Okay.
incorporating social platforms and social collaboration into our lifestyles. We start talking things like social medicine and preemptive medicine, and start watching how digital becomes a part of
Yeah.
of health, and those sorts of things are mind blowing and exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing what people are going to be doing in that space.
I think you raised some interesting points, and I think some rather broad points because I think the change that has to for that better boat to be created is quite dramatic in many senses.
Yeah,
But I think also it's only the brand manager that gets truly excited about their brand. No one else really cares. Quite honestly,
sure.
we don't wake up and get excited about anyone else's brands.
It depends. There are a few, there
No,
are
no.
one.
I love Apple. I love my iPad. I love my iPhone. But I don't get up in the morning thinking, who can I tell about this? I don't
Recently
get that
had,
excited.
I recently had chicken lick and hot wings.
Yeah?
You've ever had chicken lick and hot wings?
No, that sounds a bit too hot and spicy for
No, your life
me.
changed. I promise you. I'm not a hot food fan. I'm I'm like passionate about few brands, but I had
Yeah.
chicken and hot wings, and my life changed. So
Okay.
yeah, allow me to introduce you in this podcast and the rest of your listeners to
Okay.
chicken and hot wings, and may your life change forever.
Okay.
That's my message. Take away nothing else from this video podcast except for
Okay.
chicken and hot wings. And Apple. Apple's great as
No,
well.
it works. But okay. Apart from those very few brands that you really get excited about, how do you create that content that is contextual? Because for someone to get up on a platform and talk about their brands and what have you, is missing the point. How do you go about creating that content and trying to make that boat more effective? I know it's not a simple question because every brand is different, every strategy is unique, and every outcome has to be different for every specific strategy. But your
It's, it's,
thoughts
a,
on
it's
that?
a it's a brilliant question because that is really the issue, and that's the only reason
Yeah.
that Cerebra remains, a driving force in social media is because we're extremely good at creating great content for brands
Okay.
and distributing that content, and then moderating communities around the content that we then publish for those brands. The problem I find with brands today, and
Yeah.
especially corporate brands, not necessarily smaller businesses, but with corporate brands, there is no lack of content being created by businesses today, in all facets of business and in all of those different verticals and silos
Yeah.
and clusters within business. The problem is not a creation problem; it's an aggregation problem. Nobody's aggregating that content efficiently and repurposing it for social channels. And again, that is one of the things that Cerebra is very proud of being good at doing. You know, we work with big brands like Vodacom and Nedbank, where aggregating content across silos and clusters is a mammoth task. It's a problem. It's hard to do. You know, especially when you've only got one social channel. So what you've got to try and do is apportion share of voice for 8 clusters across one social channel. That's tough, you know.
That's very tough.
And we believe that we've got pretty good at doing that. And so the problem is not a content creation problem, I don't believe, unless you're a very boring brand. The problem is a content aggregation and publication and moderation problem. Again, that's something we believe we do fairly well. So yeah,
it's an interesting challenge that I admire your tenacity for taking it on, because I don't think it's an easy one.
We do our best.
Yeah. Mike, just to really wrap up then, because we're heading on here. In terms of SMEs, what do you think some of the biggest challenges that they face getting into a social media environment or a social business environment? Because it is being more than.
I was hoping you were going to finish that question with what are the biggest challenges they face, so I could complain about SARS and business banks and badly paying customers. Running a small business is not easy in South Africa. But
no, it's not.
So if you are a small business out there and you're running a successful business, stand up and pat yourself on the back, because it's one hell of a challenge. It really is. But in terms of social media, the problem for 90% of the guys that want to engage in social media, small businesses, is purely time. And that's why I spoke about, if you're already engaged in social media in a personal capacity, you'll find time to, I look at guys like Jean Visser from AfriHost. There's a guy that is naturally drawn to social media. So for him to promote his SME, AfriHost arguably becoming a corporate these days, they're doing incredibly well. But for him to do it naturally is going to be a very easy step for him, because it's just a transition. But for guys that it isn't a natural step for, you're going to have to look to outsource some of that activity if you see it as a strategic advantage. Again, step back and say, is social media a strategic advantage or opportunity for my business? If not, if you cannot see the clear benefit, the impact on your bottom line from social media, don't be deceived. Don't be wrapped up in hype. This is there's got to be a clear benefit. Otherwise, I would strongly recommend you avoid it like the plague, because it could be a massive time-wasting initiative. So, think carefully about whether or not it's worth your while, and if it is, then either outsource it, do it yourself, or I don't know, make time.
Make time. Okay, Mike, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show.
Fantastic.